Hello everyone, and welcome to Module 3. In Module 3, we'll be talking about conducting literature reviews. We'll start on this topic, and in Module 3, we'll cover the purpose of literature reviews and the nuts and bolts of searching for and synthesizing literature. In Module 4, we'll talk more about writing an introduction. So your book gives a nice overview of why we review literature and why we want to synthesize the literature. One of the primary reasons is that we want to inform our own research. And so we want to be able to use the literature to develop a research question and to design the research. And one of the basic ways in which we use literature reviews is to also make sure our research hasn't been done before. So hopefully, if we read through some articles and understand what has been done, we'll develop a research question and design our research in a way that doesn't entirely duplicate other people's research, unless that is, of course, something we're interested in doing. Your book talks a bit about the use of literature reviews for qualitative versus quantitative research, and I will just say that I don't agree entirely with their assessment of that. They give a sense that you don't do as much literature review to inform a qualitative study as you do a quantitative study, that the literature review tends to happen during the analysis phase. And while I agree that qualitative research tends to have much more back and forth with the literature during the analysis phase, you really should still do a complete and thorough lit review to inform the design and the ideas that will lead up to qualitative research. Ultimately, my sense of qualitative research and my approach to research methodology in terms of deciding whether research should be qualitative or quantitative is that that decision should be dictated by your research question. And so if you don't know what your research question is until you read the literature and synthesize that and develop your research question, you can't necessarily walk into a lit review knowing if your design is going to be qualitative or quantitative. In theory, that is true. For many of us, we know that we are either qualitative or quantitative researchers, and we don't have very much skill or assistance or resources to conduct one particular kind of research. And so the kind of research question that we develop may be limited by our resources, whether those are our own resources in terms of analysis ability, research abilities, or external resources that dictate the kind of research that we might want to conduct. But in general, I don't think that there is much of a difference in terms of the lit review that we conduct prior to conducting either qualitative or quantitative research. So I just wanted to counter that piece from the book. So another reason that we conduct literature reviews is to synthesize literature. And obviously we want to synthesize the literature to inform the research, develop the research question, design the research. But we also may want to synthesize literature to be able to introduce our idea. So we want to establish a problem or the need for research, potentially a gap in the research literature that we are going to fill. And ultimately all of that should help lead the researcher into your research question. I often talk about writing an introduction, and we'll talk more about this in Module 4, as really a very storytelling sort of a process, giving the reader a sense of what's out there, what's missing, and how your study is the obvious solution to that. We also write literature reviews for standalone lit reviews. So sometimes these are for courses that you will take. Sometimes these may be to give you a better sense of what's happening in the literature and what people have done. There may be a variety of ways in which we use standalone lit reviews. And another way, which we'll talk more about when we talk about translating research into practice, is to inform our practice. So the standalone lit review may help us understand the literature more broadly, but we may also want to use that to be able to make decisions about education practices, therapy practices, etc. So between your book and this, you should have a pretty good sense of why we conduct literature reviews. So we'll talk a little bit more about the standalone literature review. The standalone literature review helps to establish a context. So what are you talking about? What are you not talking about? Anytime you conduct a literature review that is standalone, you'll want to establish that context and give the reader a sense of that. The standalone literature review should also explain the importance of that topic. So why should I care about reading all of this, your synthesis of all of this literature? A standalone literature review should also provide a concise overview of the literature within those boundaries that you established. So if you said you would cover X, Y, and Z, cover X, Y, and Z. And the standalone lit review should also give the reader a take-home message. So what are the main things that you know now? What are your critiques of the literature? Are there things wrong with methods, samples, survey instruments? Your book gives some nice advice about this, and I would echo this, that you should really be careful in critiques. Research can never be perfect, and you never know who might read your research, who might be a friend of a researcher, and so just in general in life, but especially in your critique of literature, don't be a jerk about it. And your standalone lit review should also give a sense of what you think researchers should be doing next based on what you know now and your critiques of that literature. And then should also give the reader a sense of what are the questions that you still have. For the purposes of this course, you'll develop a research proposal that will hone in on one of those questions that you still have after reading through the literature. But a standalone literature review should really give a nice synthesis of what we know, how might that information be flawed, and where should we go next. So your book does a nice overview of the rest of the standalone literature piece and gives you some information about how to write that. We'll talk more about writing an introduction more specifically in Module 4, and we'll focus the rest of this module's lecture on how to conduct a lit review, so the nuts and bolts of how to find literature. So you can look in a variety of places, academic databases, PsycInfo, PubMed, journal table of contents. I typically don't do this just straight out of the gate when I look at a new topic, when I'm interested in a new topic. But one of the things that I do to keep updated on the literature is through most journals, you can actually go in and get a journal table of content alert. So every time a new issue of that journal comes out, you'll get an email with that table of contents. And so that's a great way to keep up on the literature. If you know that you have a specific topic that you're interested in, if you know that a specific journal is dedicated to that topic or often publishes on that topic, then it's a good idea to set up those alerts so that you can just skim through those when they come in every month or however often that journal releases a new issue, and kind of keep up to date on a particular literature. And you can then download the articles that are relevant for you when they come through. Reference lists are a key place, so as you find articles that are particularly relevant for you, make sure that you read through those reference lists and note specific references that you may want to get. And so there are some people that look down on Google Scholar to some degree, and I think that is unwarranted. I think Google Scholar is an incredibly powerful search engine. And it is entirely what I use. I don't remember the last time I used PsycInfo or PubMed. So Google Scholar has a lot of refinement options, and it integrates with most reference software, which we'll talk about a bit more. So because I use Google Scholar and because those nuts and bolts are important, I'll talk about it a little bit more now. So this is what a Google Scholar page looks like when you go through the citation or the search process. And so I'll just point out a few things on this page. So for this, I was interested in getting information on substance use among gay and bisexual men. And so I'll talk a bit more about Boolean operators in the next slide. But I know that gay men in the literature can sometimes be called gay, they can sometimes be called bisexual, they can sometimes be referred to as MSM, or men who have sex with men. And so I wanted to make sure that I got articles that either said gay or MSM. And the same thing for substance use. Some articles may say substance use, some articles may say drug use. And so I wanted to make sure I got substance use or drug as my search terms. And again, I'll talk more about search terms in just a second. So when you get these results, you can refine them in a variety of ways. So in this particular search, I refined the years of publication to the last decade. And you can decide if that makes sense for you. If the literature is scarce in your particular topic, you may want to not refine that age or that range for a bit. And you may not want to refine that on your first round because you may want to get a sense of how the literature has changed, what's out there, was a lot published in the 90s and not much since. So on your first round, it may be good to not limit that. One of the reasons I love using Google Scholar is now through so many public access policies, specifically through the National Institutes of Health, and through a lot of websites like academia.edu, ResearchGate, things like that. A lot of people will post the PDFs of their articles. So over here on the side, you'll see that you can get HTML versions of all of these, and in many of these, you'll be able to download the PDF. So those are all over there. And under here, so you actually have the articles that you can click on. And if you use the same browser all the time, the article that you have clicked on already will turn purple, which is a way that you can sort of track what you've already looked at. If you use reference software, and I'll talk more about that at the end, you can set up Google in your settings, which are over here, to be able to specifically import into EndNote or into RefWorks. If you decide to use Zotero, and again, this will make more sense at the end, once you download Zotero, you'll get the little Zotero button up here, and when you click on this bottom half of your screen will turn into the Zotero software, and so you'll be able to see how that works, and Zotero has tutorials and things like that. So another thing that you can do in Google Scholar is you can say, oh, this article is perfect, this is exactly what I was looking for, let's find everything that might be related to that. And so it'll do a search that will give you perhaps a more refined look at the specific topic that you're interested in. And you can also look for people who have cited that article. So your book talks about Social Sciences Citation Index. I don't really use that and haven't used it since I conducted a meta-analysis 10 years ago. And now if I want to see who has cited something, I can just look at this cited button. You can click on here and it will give you all the articles that have cited this particular article. And so you can get a sense of how much an article has been cited. That may give you a little bit more of a sense of how key of an article it is. If you go up here and click on this button, you can also refine your search terms more here. So you may want to say to not have a specific search term in here. So if you see in this search, I'm getting a lot of stuff in here that is probably not related at all to what I'm interested in. So this is lots of words that I don't really know what they mean, but clearly not something that I am interested in. So I may be able to find some words that keep showing up over and over in the irrelevant articles and be able to refine my search a little bit more. So I won't say anything more about that, but I will say a little bit more about some tools that the library has to be able to help you conduct searches. So what are you looking for when you're conducting your initial literature review? I always tell students to start with review articles. And your book talks about review articles as being secondary sources, and certainly this is not the only thing that you would want to look at. But I think review articles are fantastic because these articles have already done the process of summarizing a lot of previous work, typically meeting specific kinds of parameters, perhaps limiting their work in specific ways, making a specific point, and certainly spinning their own synthesis on that. So this is really useful when conducting literature review because this is a way in which you can see a lot of literature collected in one place. And meta-analyses will also do that in a more systematic way typically, but they will give you a sense of the literature. Empirical articles are articles on your topic or related topics that present research. So you may look for empirical articles that have cited key articles that you're interested in, or articles that are cited by your key articles, looking at reference lists. These are the kinds of research articles that you're going to probably find typically when you're first starting out your literature review. You may also be interested in theoretical articles that are overviews of bodies of research and or knowledge to define a concept. So sometimes articles will talk about the evolution or development of a construct or a concept. Sometimes it's a critique of that. These articles typically don't emphasize methodologies, but rather organize findings of previous research to make very specific arguments or very specific discussions of a theory or a theoretical framework. You may also be interested in getting a sense of behavior, attitudes, and so you may actually want to go to large surveys or data sources to get a sense of national level data. So CDC.gov, national surveys, we certainly have AdHealth that we can look at as well. SAMHSA.gov, General Social Survey, all sorts of surveys are out there, and most of them put out summaries of their own findings every year. So that may be helpful to you in establishing a problem. So often articles will start out and say, 30% of people have engaged in a particular behavior. So this is maybe substance use or sexual risk behavior or what have you. And a lot of that data we can get from these national surveys. So as I mentioned, I'll talk a little bit about searching smart, and your book does a nice job about explaining Boolean search terms, and these help you carry out more effective searches and cut out unrelated articles. So Boolean operators are and, or, not, and parentheses. There are also wildcard symbols that can be really useful to you, and your book talks about those. So a search that we may do would be to look at gay or MSM or men who have sex with men, and HIV. That's usually sufficient when we're searching for HIV, and we don't have to spell out the whole thing. And we may be looking at drug or substance or addiction or abuse. That's casting a very wide net. But we actually don't want to know about HIV medication or adherence to medication, and so we may want to cut out that particular search term. So you can see how using these Boolean terms can help you get very specific in your searching. And as you read literature, start jotting down alternative and relevant terms, keywords that are used in other abstracts, different kinds of spellings of things, different topics that may be getting at what you're interested in but may not be exactly what you've been searching for. And really keep track of these as you move through your literature search. So when we're getting empirical articles, what are we looking at? And so the first thing that you're looking at is the abstract. As you go through a Google Scholar search, the first thing that you're going to hit on is the abstract. And this is really the place in which you're fishing through and trying to find out if you actually even want to pull the full text of an article and look through it. So generally from an abstract, you'll have a pretty good sense of what that article is about, the methods, the samples, and the conclusions that they're making. And so you'll be able to decide, wow, that's not relevant at all, or that's definitely exactly what I'm looking at. I should go pull the full text article. When you're looking at the introduction, you're often using that to find additional literature, to find other authors' justifications or rationales for specific research decisions, to find other people's evaluations of theories, models, methods, to find their theories that they used. Obviously, when we're looking at the methods, we're trying to find the methodological details. And when we're looking at the results to get the specific findings, I would just caution you not to get too hung up on the statistics. I think a lot of people feel a little bit overwhelmed by the research literature because they feel like they're not going to be able to understand analyses and the results. And so don't get too hung up on these. Get the take-home message, which usually is in that first paragraph of the discussion section. So try and get the gist of a results section and then move on to the first paragraph of the discussion where they summarize that. The discussion will also help you think through the implications of the research and help you understand the results. And really importantly, particularly for what we might be doing for this class, the discussion will help you get ideas for future research and generate future research questions. And then finally, your reference list will be able to help you find any articles that you've identified throughout the course of reading that article that may be relevant for you. And so I think a lot of people struggle with moving from those articles to a literature review. And one of the ways that can be helpful to do that is by using annotated bibliographies. And annotated bibliographies are a summary of each of our sources. So they may summarize or paraphrase the main points that are relevant for you to your topic or to your questions. They should note the sample characteristics. They should be in your own words. That will help you to avoid plagiarizing. They could include a notation about how you might use that information in your introduction or in your literature review. You could compare or contrast the articles to others like it. And you should include, obviously, the basic author information in the citation, but you may include specific information about who that author is if that's relevant for you. And as we'll talk more at the end, all this information can be done and all this notation can be done using reference software. Typically there's notes or keywords fields, and that can be really helpful in helping synthesize a literature and to really distill down the article in a way that will help you compare it to other articles and start to develop a synthesis of those ideas. So you can use software to manage literature, and you can use software to conduct lit searches themselves, but also to review the literature. And this can be standalone. EndNote is a popular reference software, and within EndNote, you can use many different databases, PsycInfo, PubMed, things like that, to be able to conduct the lit review right there in the software. As I noted when I reviewed Google Scholar, most of the softwares integrate with Google Scholar and allow you to use Google Scholar to do the search and then interact directly with your reference software. And then again with PsycInfo, PsycArticles, PubMed, most of the databases where we're going to look for articles now integrate with many of the main reference softwares. And using these softwares really helps you to organize your literature. So you can create specific groups, you can create keywords, you can take notes, you can put keywords in those notes. And this really lets you organize your literature in a way. Your book talks about using note cards and writing things out. I really would not recommend that you do that. That is, in my opinion, not a great use of time. If you're really averse to technology, that may be better for you. But I think particularly if you're going to move forward in this field in any way in which you're going to interact with the literature, start using a reference software now, because that will just be better for you moving forward to be able to keep everything organized. This also allows you to keep the PDFs of the articles all in one place. So any of these softwares will allow you to keep the PDFs in there with the actual citation and the reference. One of the main things that is amazing, and your book talks about this, is being able to cite while you write. So this means that you can go into a Word document, start typing, and then have your reference software interact with Microsoft Word to be able to include the citation in there. And this is really key if you're submitting articles to particular journals, so let's say with different styles. So let's say I'm submitting an article to a journal that has APA style as the style that it requests authors to use. And it's rejected from that journal, and I decide to go to another journal, and that journal has AMA style. Instead of having to retype all of my references, in most of these softwares there's a button that you can push or a reference style that you can select, and it will change everything for you automatically. And if you remove references as you're editing the paper, you don't have to go back into your bibliography section and remove those from that section. It will just keep building a reference list for you at the end of your paper based on what you actually have in the paper. It's phenomenal. If you haven't tried it yet, I would highly recommend using that. There are many available. We have RefWorks available through Widener. I am most familiar with EndNote. That costs money unless you have access somehow, which I did at my last institution. A newer one is Zotero, and I actually have a couple of colleagues who have used Zotero and recommended that one to me. I haven't used it a ton. I obviously downloaded it and showed you the button for that, but that might be one that will be useful to you beyond when you're at Widener and have access to RefWorks. For more information on conducting literature reviews and the research process more generally, you should look at the Widener website, the library website. And I've also in this module included a presentation written by library staff on the research process. So I put that on Campus Cruiser, and it's also on the library website. So definitely look at that information. That information in that presentation will give you much more of the nuts and bolts of how to get to a journal, how to find a specific journal article using the library website. And so for those of you who are less familiar with that process, I would strongly recommend reviewing that presentation. And from what I know, we have an incredibly responsive librarian who helps us out. So if you need help, you can also contact her directly, and she will be able to help you with your literature review and with searching for literature. For the assignment for Module 3, I would like you to begin your literature review and get fairly deep into this process to be able to turn in a topic idea and search strategies paragraph. The research proposal instructions document has an example of this, a brief example of this, but I also want you to include a working reference list. So in APA format, include the references that you have collected so far in addition to that topic idea and search strategies paragraph. You'll turn that in via assignments in Campus Cruiser, and the grading rubric is attached to that assignment so you can see how those points will be distributed. And if you have questions or thoughts about this content or about the particular assignment, start a topic under the general discussions forum. All right, I look forward to Module 4.